Okay, hello everybody, and we are going to continue on here with a consideration of two factors in two variables in the norming of assessments, particularly standard norm referenced assessments, although these factors apply also to non-standard assessment, including criterion referenced scoring systems, and that is reliability and validity. Now, what's the difference? Reliability refers to consistency within an assessment instrument, and there are multiple types of consistency, whereas validity refers to whether the assessment actually evaluates what it claims to be evaluating. And there are multiple kinds of evidence of validity that we'll be touching upon here. Now, I do want to think on this particular lecture, this component of the validity reliability set, I'm going to be focusing on reliability, and that is consistency. Now, the consistency, one type of consistency is the type that's referred to as test-retest consistency. And that is consistency in scoring of a group of individuals who take the test more than one time. There's another statistic called standard error of measurement, which also really refers to consistency in performance and in results over time. Now, consistency, I want to think about that for a second as it relates to language assessment, because that's what we all are, speech-language pathologists, and the focus is on language. Why is consistency so important and expected, in fact? And the answer to that is language itself. The nature relates to the nature of language itself. Language is, think about what language is really about. It's about mind function. Mind function. It's analogous to walking, as I see it. Now think about walking for a second. In the morning when we wake up and get out of bed, we do walk. When we go for our breakfast, we walk. When we go to school, we walk. At night, when we come home, we're still walking. Walking, as we all know, is a neurologic function of, again, controlled by brain function, essentially. And it's consistent. Now, if you're on some kind of a substance, perhaps, walking might become a little difficult as, well, I won't say anything more about that. But besides that, once you learn how to walk, you just plain walk. Well, talking isn't any different. If you speak, you speak, and you comprehend, and you do so in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. You do so this week and next week and the week after. So you would expect consistency on an assessment and consistency over time. So consistency is an important aspect of the analysis of whether an assessment is really an acceptable for use or not. Now, again, consistency is not validity. You could get consistent, and validity, remember again, refers to whether or not an assessment assesses what it claims to assess. If it's a language test, that it's actually testing language. Now, you could find that an assessment claims to be assessing something. For example, one of the very most popular assessments is this clinical evaluation of language function, which claims to be an assessment of language. And we'll take a look at that, and we will see that that assessment instrument, like many of them out there, is operating with reference to information processing, an information processing approach to language, and it raises some issues You may think this is an assessment maybe of cognitive function, not necessarily language function. Well, an assessment could claim to be an evaluation of one thing, but really be evaluating something else and still have consistent results. Now, I'm not here to criticize the self. In fact, I use it frequently. It's a very strong norm-referenced assessment. But I'm trying to make a point here, and that is that that consistency is not the same as validity. That is, consistency does not show you that the assessment is actually evaluating the behavior it claims to. It is simply demonstrating that something about the assessment is consistent. And there are several types of consistency, and we'll look at those right now. We'll refer to both of them actually, and that you may have noticed on these standard norm referenced assessments, such as this. Let's take a couple that you may be familiar with: the GREs, the Praxis, the SATs. Lots and lots of questions, right? Lots of items, lots of items. On this test, these language tests, that assessment instruments that are given to children: clinical evaluation of language functions, the SELF; PAT, the phonologic awareness test. Many, many items. Why so many items? Well, one of the reasons is that there's an effort in designing these assessment instruments to make sure that one particular area of knowledge or performance is measured more than once. One particular area of knowledge and performance is assessed more than once. Why? Well, if you've taken these assessments yourself, you know you may become distracted randomly at one moment or another. Again, you may something may come up and you skip a line, say, by accident. Something happens. If that was the only example of that particular area of language, say, that was being assessed at that particular level of difficulty, there was one shot, and if you missed it, that was it. The test would be way weaker than if that particular level of difficulty of that particular area of language performance was assessed more than once. So internal consistency is an effort to assess consistency of aspects of performance that are assessed within a single instrument. And the one approach to that assessment of internal consistency is the split half reliability analysis. Split half, and what's typically done is in split half is that an assessment with many, many items on it is split into two assessments, and often the even items make in one assessment from one assessment instrument, the even items are taken out and made, and one test is made, and the odd items are taken out, every other item, the odd items, and that makes another assessment. And these two assessments, one of these two versions or forms of one test, these two forms of one test, the even items part of the test and the odd items part of the test, each of those is given to the same group of individuals. So that, and then the scores or the performance is compared on the two assessments, the even item and the odd item assessments drawn from one test. And if there's a high correlation in performance on the two half tests, so to speak, then there's evidence that there is high reliability in terms of internal consistency, high internal consistency. That's a different kind of consistency than retest consistency, internal consistency, but it's important. There's a statistical approach to that called the Kueter-Richardson statistic that does that analysis statistically. So the results in an assessment are analyzed statistically for consistency. But Split Half or Kueter-Richardson both address this concept of internal consistency. Now, there's one other type of reliability that I want to address here, and that is rater reliability. Now, you may be familiar with inter-rater reliability, I-N-T-E-R, inter-rater reliability, from your research course or your research-based statistics course or your own personal research experience. Now, what this is often in scoring, there's subjectivity. Not always, but sometimes. I said often. It depends on the type of an assessment. In fact, in standard norm referenced assessments, there's not much subjectivity. Yes, as I was saying, in typical standard norm referenced assessments, often the test could be evaluated by a computer. There's black and white, right and wrong answers that are given to you or the computer by the test creator, and you give 1 point for the performance according to that criterion, and 0 points if the response is anything else. In that case, there's minimal subjectivity, if any. But in other kinds of assessment, there's lots of subjectivity. For example, in the Blumen-Leahy criterion referenced assessment, in a Blumen-Leahy assessment, think about your judgments of utterances and the decision to call them to place them into the category of one content area or another. You know, the boy jumped, is that action or locative action? This is a blue potato. I saw actually something that very much approached a blue chicken in a store that I visited yesterday. No more comments on that other than there they were, very dark-skinned chickens. In any event, putting that aside, that's a blue chicken. Is that existence or attribution? Well, I gave you a procedure, if you were in my acquisition or disorders course, SVC procedure, to control for that. But still, there's an element of potential subjectivity. How could you control for that subjectivity? Have a separate rater, someone else who is independent of you, independently score at least part of the assessment results that you're scoring. Inter-rater reliability, and then correlate. Look at the relationship between the evaluator's assessment and a second independent scorer's assessment. Following me? That's inter-rater reliability. There's also intra-INTRA rater reliability, and that's where one person scores an assessment twice. One person does it twice. I do that, in fact, whenever I give essay type assessment test. Criterion referenced. One of the essay tests that we have in the department is our comps. Actually, that is an essay-based test, I think. In any event, whenever we give an essay comps, I always make sure to score the essay twice independently. And you know why? Because I find that when I start out scoring, and I always have a rubric that I'm applying, but still, I still find that when I start to evaluate an essay, and then I go through the work of other students, I find that by the time I reach the last student in a large group of students, I may be making judgments that were not quite the same as the kinds of judgments that I made initially, because I'm being affected by there's something subjective about the judgments. So I always rate an essay more than one time. That's intra-rater reliability. The type of rater reliability that's most typically carried out is inter-rater reliability, and not on standard norm-referenced assessments, not on norm-referenced assessments, but in criterion-referenced assessments, such as the Blumen-Leahy language sample approach, or a Piagetian analysis of behavior, or the Rossetti scale, where you're evaluating, looking for particular kinds of behavior that represent development. Those kinds of criterion-referenced assessments often require the establishment of inter-rater reliability. So we reviewed how many types of reliability? Standard error of measure, that at least is a statistic related to reliability. Rater reliability, test-retest reliability, internal consistency, and which is measured by split half and Kuder-Richardson statistic. I want to say one more thing. I'm going to return and talk about one more thing, and that is the idea of reliability coefficients, and essentially what is a correlational statistic.